they say, well, my niche is dead, but I know everybody in it. Okay, that sounds like a cemetery to me, dude. But I see tremendous success from people who chase hot markets.
I think when Twitter came out, everybody thought, hooray, now I don't have to make phone calls again. And I even came up with an acronym for Twitter, Danny and Mike. It was time wasted in trying to escape rejection. And I think
what we find when someone calls and they've got all this menu of all these technical things, they all have to lead to conversations, which is what, as you opened up with, Danny, they're all trying to avoid.
All right, welcome everybody. So let me just introduce this new jam that we're doing. You guys wouldn't be on this podcast if you didn't already know my colleagues and friends, Scott Love and Mike Gianta. So here was the idea that brought this. If you're watching this podcast, you probably watch recruiter podcasts. Here is what I've found they all are. They all are. You get a top producer, you get him on, and then you take him or her through their origin story. How'd you start in the business? Most of them are 100 years ago, so it's completely irrelevant. What was your life like? Who raised you? And then there's much talks about, parents and gratitude. And then we get into how you actually do your job. These are awesome. I watch them. I think they're cool, but they're all the same. Now, when you're not watching those podcasts, you generally use coaches, whether you use me or Mike or Scott or Peter Lefkowitz or all the other good people that are in the business. So you have this, I follow top producers and then I need coaching. So it seemed to me, what if we got the coaches together and gave you some space to hear us talk about the things that you always ask us about in email after watching one of our sessions. So that's the idea of this. We're going to take one topic every time we get together, and we're going to kick it around. And we're not going to talk about our origin stories because we've all told them so many times. And frankly, I'm at the point where I can't even remember mine. So we talked about this, and Scott, Mike, and I said, well, who is asking what to all of us? And there was a lot of common denominators, so we'll have a lot of episodes. But we thought we'd tackle this one first. A lot of you who have followed us for a long time and use our coaching services for a long time, in a quiet place, will email us or call us in a panic and say, is it me, or is recruiting harder the longer I've been in it? This business seems like it's harder than ever before. A lot of you after last year are making less money than you've made in a long time. So let's tackle that question. So guys, let me throw this out to you. Shouldn't it be easier? I mean, shouldn't it be a lot easier? I mean, we have generative AI that does your messaging. You have advanced CRMs that are AI enabled, that give you a tremendous amount of access to clients. You've got databases of clients. You can read information about clients. There really is no such thing as a cold call anymore because of LinkedIn. Then you have all these sourcing tools that get you the candidate. Shouldn't it be easier? What do you think?
Scott, you want to go first?
I'll go first. I think that the theme, I would look at it through this lens, is that every war is won with boots on the ground. It's hand-to-hand combat. It's person to person. And I think if we look at from when I started in the business in 95 to today, it's a people business. And we don't want it to be a people business. I think deep down inside, we all have this fear of rejection. I think when Twitter came out, everybody thought, hooray, now I don't have to make phone calls again. And I even came up with an acronym for Twitter, Danny and Mike. It was time wasted in trying to escape rejection. And I think that's what it is. I think in the back of our mind, we're looking for that silver bullet so I don't have to be on the phone anymore.
Yeah.
And I've tried to quit recruiting 4 times this year because it can be painful. And I think if you're doing the business the way you should, it depletes you from all the energy in your life. And you have to admit it, and you have to look for ways to build that back in. So I think that's why it's harder, Danny, because we would expect don't have to be on the phone anymore. But ironically, that's where it is. I remember there was this one tech firm pre-COVID hired me. They're in Newark, New Jersey. Founder came from India, All they do is tech. He's got an office in India and an office in Newark. And he said, we want to hire you to teach my people skills, telephone communication skills, because I see that as a competitive advantage. So I think that's what makes it harder, is that we would expect, I don't have to be on the phone 4 hours a day anymore. I don't have to do my 4 hours of phone time. And that's not what it's all about. Just like the hokey pokey people skills, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mike?
You agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, I think Scott, I thought it was a great question when you posed it to the three of us, because I kind of went through with all of us, people come to us and they want help, right? They're usually at a plateau where they've usually dipped. And I think what happens is with all those people that if you said it was harder when they believe it's harder. That's the thing. They believe it's harder.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two is, like when I joined Burger King in the early 80s, you started on putting the burgers on the chains, sweating your butt off. And if you did really well there for 2 weeks, you got to go to fries. And then like if you showed you were an excellent employee, you went to Burger Board. And if they trusted you enough, they eventually put you up at the front, to cashier. And with recruiters, you start in one role and you're usually there 30 years from now.
Right.
And so what happens, I think, with a lot of people is the challenge goes away. They don't push themselves to work C-level searches, retainers, work projects. It just becomes that old commercial, that Dunkin' Donut, time to make the donuts, where the guy shuffles in, 3 a.m. in the morning and makes the donuts. And they become bored and unchallenged. And the second thing, I think, when people come in, right, and you've done this, Danny, you've made a bunch of rich people. I made a bunch of rich people in my firm. They got their new car, they get their new house, they have a couple nice vacations, and then they're like the dog that caught the rabbit, and then you have to put it out, to a farm someplace because it loses that edge. And unless they continually challenge themselves with another level in the business, whether it's scaling a business, scaling a team, or just their searches, 7, 8 years in, it becomes the same old, same old.
Yeah, no, that resonates. I think, it's funny. We always call the new generation entitled spoiled brats. And I wonder if it's not a projection on our part, right? Because what you're really saying is, when someone has been a producer for 20 or 25 years and it's like it's the same old, I'm doing the same thing I did 20 years ago, just with different tools. Right. And it's made you rich and it's given you status and it enables you to, have this lifestyle that you couldn't have had, but you still get sick of it. So there's a certain sense of entitlement. And of course, Mike, what makes it so difficult is the obvious thing you've said. Well, you should scale a team. Okay. But a lot of them are producers and not very good managers, awful managers, traditionally. So when you say, okay, you're burning out, let me give you a challenge, go scale a team. Well, they fail at scaling the team and then they produce less because they've been so busy trying to scale the team. And now they're more upset than ever before. The other one you mentioned, though, I think is more gettable, which is moving up the chain, right? Like, I think a lot of this is just energy level. Like when I look back, I hardly ever, and I know either one of you guys probably don't either, I never in my training talk about how I ran my desk because it's irrelevant. I mean, the fact that I was able to punch out 150 calls a day, now that would be literally a stupid thing to do. That would not be very effective. So the way we measured ourselves back then, you can't measure yourself the same way. So I do think there's this combination of, I've been doing it one way for a long time. I have no interest in doing it a new way, but I'm more tired. So give me some shortcut to do it. And then they come to us for shortcuts. And maybe you guys have a shortcut, but I don't. Other than sometimes when I get someone in personal mentoring and they say they're burned out and 23 was awful and it's not going to get any better, then I say, okay, so let's talk about this. You could. What? And then I just shut up. And it becomes clear within a few minutes that, being a senior recruiter is like being the vice president. It prepares you for nothing, right? It really gives you absolutely no, unless you wanted to go to Talent Act, But for most people, that ship has sailed too, and they wouldn't be happy because they'd be doing the same job for a lot less money, just a lot less stress. So it seems like a kind of reverse entitlement to me.
It is, and all the things you talked about all the things you talked before about, even if you don't want to scale a team, because you have offshore research. So you can, if you're in the business 10, 20 years and you're sitting down with, people ask us, Mike, what are the great extensions, to get phone numbers and that? I go, I have no idea. And we don't teach that. Because if I'm teaching you as a biller how to do a $10 an hour activity, I am disserving you. We have partners that will tell you that are good researchers, and go use them. Number one. Number two is there's also companies, we've identified a number of them, that'll actually do the initial outreach, right? So that,
yes.
I have no idea if you're looking for an opening. I just wanted to talk to you about, and then can take that data sheet to the beginning. So now if you're a senior level person, you're doing more of the things in your genius zone. So one of the things we have people do is, it's a simple exercise I learned at Strategic Coach. You just take a piece of paper, draw 3 columns. On the far left, you write down everything that's irritating. In the middle column, you write the things down that you're okay with. I'm okay doing these. It doesn't light me up. And then on the far right column is fascinating and motivating, right? And those are the things that you look up and like, oh my God, I was doing that for an hour, hour and a half. Where did the time go? Right. And the big mistake, if you're going to do this exercise, is the things in okay, a lot of times they're things we're excellent at. And another author calls it your zone of excellence, not your zone of genius.
Yeah.
So when you have those 3 columns, you can start to say, I can start delegating, even as a solo operator. There's all these virtual options. You can get rid of that entire column probably in 3 or 4 months. Correct. And then here's what I find is a lot of the okay starts to become irritating because you've created a vacuum.
Yeah.
And then now you can expand your day into the things like, I could talk to senior level executives all day long about their problems. I never got bored of that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's different for everybody. I could close deals with my recruiters all day long and never get bored with that. So you start identifying those, and those are the areas you add most value as a recruiter, or if you're a firm owner, the areas you add most value as an owner.
Mike, I'm going to build on what you said. I've got 2 points. One, I spoke at TempNet a few months ago in Napa. It's a large staffing association, people that do temp and direct hire. And we were talking about how's business. Well, the demand for talent has increased to an all-time high. So you would think that it would get easier, but there's also so many more firms that got into it, and all of your competitors doubled their footprint as well. And so what it becomes is the business development issue. How do you build that brand of distinction? What can you say about yourself that nobody else can say about themselves? And I think what helped me recently, I actually read Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy's book, 10X is Easier Than 2X. I just finished it.
Good book.
I've been reading it, read it, and then do the audiobook. And here's a life hack. Get the book, get the audiobook, do them both at the same time, and you go deeper. And he talks about what is and I can't remember what he calls it, call it your superpower. What is that one thing? And he says 10X, if you want to go 10 times what you bill, more than 2 times, if you say, I want to do double, there's 5 different ways you can do that. If you want to go 10 times, there's only one way. And so I think it starts with what is the vision that you have for your own journey in recruiting. And it's a journey. And so for myself, I teach, but I also close deals. That's really where I focus. I recruit private equity partners for global law firms, and sometimes I'll get lucky and do a law firm merger. And so getting real clear on that vision and getting rid of everything else, except for my bad habit of coaching recruiters. It pays for my golf and martinis, and that's not it.
Yeah.
But I think for most people, they haven't thought that way. And I think and I'll leave my comment with this. I think when you pursue intellectual challenge, it is tremendously satisfying. And if you don't look for it, you won't find it. We've never done it that way. We've always done it this way. We don't need any more training. We don't need any new ideas. No, I think you should always look. And I relaunched my group coaching. I relaunched the Placement Club about a year ago because I'd been dormant since 2016. I sold my training business to Next Level. I'm a member of Sanford Rose. Jeff Kay is one of my closest friends, smartest person I've ever met. And I just decided a year ago, I want to get back into teaching people. I want to shorten that learning curve. But it forces me every Monday at 1, I have to come up with ideas. I have to think about the business. And each week I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. I wouldn't have thought of that unless I've got this pressure on me to produce, to teach people, advance people. And I like the fact that when you go deep and deep and deep in your study of recruiting, it's tremendously satisfying. So I think have a vision for what you want to be. What is your 10X goal? Read that book, 10X is easier than 2X. And then also, how do you pursue intellectual challenge in recruiting? I think when you have those 3 things going for you, it's going to get easier. I wouldn't say it's easier. It's still going to be hard, but you're going to see results. And I think that's why I love doing deals. I love it.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the two types of people that are watching this. One might be an owner who says, yeah, get me to 10X because here's what's been happening. I used to have a 25% margin when, Mike billed 700,000 on his desk with a couple of internet tools and a phone, and a group health plan expense. But now I have to get him a LinkedIn recruiter seat, and I have to get him Zoom, and I have to get him a video conferencing tool, and he's being told these are the things that make life easier. And I've gotten him all those things. And sure enough, good old Mike is still billing 600,000. Only now I'm making 10% on that desk. So it's like, if you're going to take on all these additional tools, then there has to be a bigger output. And I can hear owners muttering and saying, yeah, they don't get to 10X, they get to 2X, but I'm not making any more money. But then I think about the recruiter who's listening, and I do have some empathy. And here's what I mean by that. I'm training a rookie at my office this week, and it occurred to me, as I went through my normal Monday and Tuesday orientation, that it was just so much simpler to understand as a business model, right? Like, we have to go get jobs. How do we get jobs? Well, we get an NPC and we get a target list and we make calls. And clients only really had a couple of options when they had a critical role, right? They could post it. Back in the day, it was a paper. They were putting an ad in on a Sunday. Now it's a post. But it's either they do it themselves through internal referrals, get people from a posting, or pay you. Now there are so many sourcing tools available to them that there's a bigger sense from clients that we can do this ourselves. And they, as you guys all know, and so everybody knows listening, about 10 years ago, they got real smart and said, we shouldn't just have internal recruiters, we should have talent acquisition specialists. And we're going to get them by trying to recruit Mike Gianta's people or Scott Love's people. And we're going to pay them $100,000 basis because they don't make that at recruiting firms. And they're all sick of living on commission. And we're going to promise them equity. And we're going to give them the same LinkedIn recruiter seats. So I can imagine to a recruiter who says it's much harder to learn now because in my own office this week, this recruiter has to learn not just the placement process and basic selling, but also our workflow, which I'm not sure even I understand at this point, the correct sequencing, right? And it becomes so much systems engineering that I think you get away from what Scott said at the outset, the people part of this. And I think it is more complex and harder to learn. And it is easy to say, well, geez, I'm not quite sure I understand how to use Bullhorn. Can you walk me through that again? Nobody's asking me to walk them through the 10 classic closes or features and benefits when I do the sales training, but they all want to know exactly how do I attach this and what's my password for that tool. Yeah. And so I guess to push back against what we've been saying and trying to put myself in the mind of the people that are out there, is the pie smaller, right? I mean, for all the years that you and I came up in this business, and I came up earlier than you guys, but 10 years earlier, the number was always about 14%. So 14% represented through 3 different decades the percentage of jobs that our industry fills. Like, we don't fill 86% of the jobs. 86% of the jobs have always been word of mouth or somebody, knows somebody. So we've always been a small percentage of the business. but I haven't seen that number in the last few years. Is it 6%? Is it 7%? So I guess people say is recruiting harder, is it harder to learn because of the systems, and is the pie smaller? Does that seem to make sense? Mike?
So is the pie smaller? Are there fewer openings? There are probably fewer technical openings in a softer economy. One client said it really well in a meeting we had, doing pretty well this year. And they said, well, yeah, it's, because they were still actually growing revenue, and but the growth rate decelerated a lot. And I loved his metaphor. He goes, we're out fishing. And he goes, the fish aren't just jumping into the boat. We actually have to fish. Right. So meaning, right. And our clients, we're very metrics driven. We have not seen a significant change in the marketing conversations to job order ratio. It's gone up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's typically like with our clients, 12 or 13, and this is not email exchanges, voicemails, actual, anywhere, depending on the client, 10 to 13. In COVID, just to give you an example, an extreme, it spiked to 36. And we collected it from all of our clients to show them, so to get them out of the mindset of no one is hiring, right?
Yes, right.
The one thing I found fascinating in COVID, just as a quick aside, the interview to placement ratio didn't change at all. At all. I thought it was we see in a recession, right? They get pickier,
right.
Anyway, but back to your original point, it's what we find when someone calls and they've got all this menu of all these technical things. They all have to lead to conversations, which is what, as you opened up with, Danny, they're all trying to avoid.
Yes.
We fix tenured people instantly. Depending on, I've done this with a couple of people that are in dire straits. Everything's blown up. They just got totally negligent. And I say, I want you to talk to 15 people a day, combined marketing and recruiting. If you need job orders, it's going to be 15 marketing conversations. And everyone thinks, well, Mike, you're a dinosaur in 2024. It doesn't happen that way anymore. I just have data. And I was in your office. It's like a space center, Danny, with all the things you've got going on. We've run power hours with our clients, and they have to show up with a prepared list. Marketing, recruiting, we don't care what it is. Everyone goes into a Zoom room. We've got about 75. I'm like a study hall monitor. I can do a lot of work during that time. I'm just watching to make sure people are dialing. We've done this. We do this almost every month, and the stats are 22.9 attempts in 45 minutes because there's a wind up and a wind down, and 3.9 conversations. Mm-hmm. So what that means is if you're focused, you can talk to 5 people in an hour.
Right.
You can talk. So what happens is they look at all this text stuff, and I get an email back from you, and I can do a great MPC email, and you say to email me back, Mike, hey, thanks, we're not hiring right now. There was nothing there to build relationship. And I have really no data on you for the next time I call about what looks like an excellent hire, what your business strategies and plans are, what your challenges have been working with either other recruiters or finding talent. There's because there's how many hiring managers out there that'll go, you know what, Mike, I'll give you a job order now because you've been around for a while.
Yeah.
They want it. They don't want somebody that they think is going to quit. And even if you've been around for 10 years, if you're breaking into a new sub niche, you haven't been around for a while.
But Mike, this is where I think Scott's experience, because Scott, you went back to a desk, which I think, I can't speak for Mike, but I think about doing it like 8 times a day. I'm just like, oh, everybody just leave and just let me do this.
I got a seat over here with your name on it, Danny.
Right. But I think
give him a 100K base, Scott.
Oh, no, you'd fire me in no time. But I think all coaches who've been around a while, and this is why I've never left my search firm, because the search firm always was going to be the think tank by which I spoke about training. There's nothing I talk about that we don't do here. But I still sometimes, when I say, look, guys, 8,000 emails and 1 lead, if you're just following postings, by definition, everybody else can scope those postings. So you've got tremendous competition. The Talent Act people already are using the same tools you are. So when you ask me, well, why can't I get a placement? And you tell me all you're doing is searching for postings and then sending resumes and hoping, I don't know why they pay you a fee. I don't have any answer for that. but you can't help getting into a headset sometimes where you say, am I wrong for telling them to do power hours and make phone calls? And I think that's one of the hard parts about being a rookie. 15 years ago, if you were in my rookie retreat, I had no problem saying to you, this is the way it's done. There's no other way. Learn this way first, and then we'll talk. But now, if somebody can show me, hey, look, I send out this sequencing and I got some responses, or I have this hot job. I have people who are recruiting first thing in the morning because they've got a hot job. I've got people who are emailing first and following it up with a phone call. Now, we've compared it to the people who make phone calls first and follow up with emails. And as Mike says, no doubt the phone call people are getting more results. But there isn't any longer, at least in my office, and I think in a lot of offices, there's no, this is the one true way, because new people resist that. And because I think we've all lost confidence in whether there is one true way. But Scott, you lived this. So when you went back to a desk, did you say, look, I only know one way, I'm going to do it, and then happily found that it works?
I did. I forced it. And let me give you an example. Back in 2001, after 9/11, I wasn't doing training. I was recruiting in the commercial construction industry. And I remember this, December 31st. Tomorrow is January 1st of 2002. I got really clear on my goals. And I decided that I'm going to create my own economy. I'm going to outwork my competition. I'm going to outthink, and I'm going to outperform them. And I made about 3 different changes. One of them was I invested 10% of my billings in my own coaching and development, hiring people to help me, reading books, going to seminars. The other thing is I decided I'm going to read every day. And then the third, I used each calendar date. Whatever the date was, that's how many submissions I'm going to make. So the 1st of the month, 1 submission. The 5th of the month, 1 submission. Following Monday, I've got to make 3 on a Monday. So if you make 3 on a Monday, 1 each other every other day of the week, that's 30 submissions a month. But where are the opportunities? All the funding dried up. And I got busy and I found a vein of gold. And I realized that someone is always hiring. There's no hospitals being built, no schools, but you know what? There are Walmarts being built. Yeah. And I built over 400,000 that year in 2002 in commercial construction. And I realized that the pie was like this. It was huge before, and it had shrunk to maybe a quarter the size, but there was still a pie. Yes. And I realized you don't have to be the best recruiter out there. You just have to be a little bit better than your competition. It's kind of like being chased in the woods by a bear. You don't have to be faster than the bear, just be faster than the guy next to you. And you're going to be okay. And that's when I realized it's all about the client. You can solve every problem in recruiting if you got good client development skills. If you understand rainmaking, if you understand how to sell your services, how to be a thought leader, if you know how to build a name that eclipses your larger global competitors, I don't want to say you got nothing to worry about, but you're going to be more fluid in your execution because it's going to work.
Yeah, and certainly anecdotally, I've noticed that 2 things are always going to be true. Clients' perception of us is they're good if it's a mission critical position. Generally, if it's a higher level position, you need a headhunter because they're specialized and they have these embedded relationships with candidates. And so you want a subject matter expert. That's absolutely true. So I think a lot of the people that we're talking about here, when we say, boy, it seems so much harder, when I get under the hood in individual coaching like Mike does, I find that they're generalists. Now, they think they're specialists because they'll say, no, I just do accounting and finance. Dude, that's a generalist, right? Yeah. Like there's people, we have a med device team here, and one med device guy would never touch a job order from another med device guy because one's doing quality people and one's doing a different type of med device. Same thing with our health tech group. So I think it's just like you're doing, not attorneys in America, which you could do, Scott. It's private equity legal people. There's a true specialist. And I think a lot of these people are under-specialized.
Exactly. Yeah.
But as you rightly say, Scott, you got to do the work to figure out which specialty you should go after. And it better be wide enough and deep enough so that there's enough companies to call. And there better be a universe of candidates that are accessible and that you understand. But I think a lot of this would go away if people we're under specialized. I say this all the time to the people that call me who are in trouble. And Mike, sounds like you get these calls too. They say, well, my niche is dead but I know everybody in it. Okay, that sounds like a cemetery to me, dude. I can get all the names in cemeteries by walking around. But I see tremendous success from people who chase hot markets. And you're a great example, Scott. You went from construction, to private equity, legal. What I find is a lot of these people mid-career feel like I don't want to do the work to build up a name in a new niche. But when I compare, okay, then stay in your own niche and understand you will suffer. And you'll probably get by because you're good, but you'll suffer. But there's going to be some rookie billing $500,000 this year, probably like Bethany, who's in a hot niche. And it's just an easier business in a hot demand niche. It just is, right?
Well, there's two things with that, right? I can, we can be like that old 60 Minutes, Jane, you ignorant slut. So I'm going to I don't disagree with you, but I can actually take a counterpoint to that.
Yeah.
I got back, when I was scaling my team and we had like Scott, the '01 recession, and to tech, it was a startup tech. And you were in that, Danny. It was like a depression.
Brutal. Yeah.
Brutal. A lot of people got hit, but so all the venture money dried up. And then all my recruiters like, Mike, you don't understand. It's hard. Nobody's hiring now. So I got back on the desk just for an afternoon a day for a couple months. But one call I made was I was talking to this guy who was the VP of sales of like a $20 million router switch company. And he was you would just think you were talking to him in 1999. He's like, oh, we doubled sales this year. We're going to double again. I'm going to need people for this, this, and this. And I'm like, I'm talking to people every day that are just like, get me the heck out of here. Business is drying up. He goes, Mike, we're 20 million. Cisco is 30 billion. He goes, we got to scratch off like one little shaving of their market share. And plus you had Bay Networks. You had a couple other companies that they were the big companies, 80, 90 billion market, and they're 20 million. And that's what I teach recruiters. Oh, no one's hiring. How much hiring is going to be done in your niche, even if it's a micro niche? Couple $100 million.
Yeah.
You need to shave off 500,000 of that to call it a great year.
Right.
So it's about capturing market share, because even in a downturn, this is a multi-billion dollar industry. So one, I remember when I got started in 1991 recession, one of the biggest billers of the year at MRI was a guy that worked the domestic shoe market.
Oh, geez.
If you would ever think there was a dead industry, he built like 90, this is like 89, 90, 91. I forgot exactly which year, just to put it in perspective, dollar wise. He built $500,000 or $600,000 on a desk in the domestic shoe industry. Why? He goes, there's me and one other guy in it. Nobody works this space. Now he came out of it, so he kind of saw the opportunity. So you can find a mature, slow growth space. If it's not riddled with recruiters, that is also a great niche because you can get higher fees. The challenge I see, like when I got started in 90, pharma sales was the hot recruiting.
Sure,
desk.
I remember.
Right, there was 5K, 3K, 5K, 10K flat fees. Remember? I never got into it because a hot niche is like ice cream on a sidewalk in July. Ants all over it. Everyone figures it out. Anything AI related now, you probably got everyone streaming into. But there's probably bits and places you can tuck yourself into in AI, which would be brilliant. I'm just not, I haven't studied that market. But if you go after the obvious types of positions, talent acquisition, now you're one of 100, 200, 300 recruiters calling them. So if you're gonna go after a hot niche, you have to have a strategy and the number one thing is not calling off of existing openings.
Right.
I'm probably, you teach the same thing. I tell people, oh yeah, you have a researcher, an opening's posted July 11th or June 11th, call them July 11th, right? Because if it's open, they have a problem. And never tell them you're calling off their posting. Like, it's like a magician going, and I know you're a magician, Scott. Here's the card trick. And you go, my God, that was brilliant. And then I go, well, here's how I did it. And you're like, oh.
Right.
There's this mystique about us that we have. Do you know about our opening? I never lie. It's my job to know if you have an opening.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's filled. I know you've had it. I heard it through my network. I heard you had it. It's been open for a few weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Like, they're looking around. How does he know this about us? What does he then know or she know about the marketplace and the candidate side?
Yeah, no, I get all that. So let's go with one other direction before we wrap this call up. So when Scott first came up with this idea, why does recruiting seem harder? Let's go the other end, because we've been talking about these senior people, these hard-bitten people who are so averse to change, ironically, because they're trying to get candidates to change every day. But the new person, right? So, for 100 years, I would train a rookie, then he gets immersed. He or she is immersed in a bullpen, surrounded by people doing the same thing. So it was always a nice thing. The training gets, then there's a cultural osmosis that goes on. Plus, you hear what I say in the training room actually being done, and you say, ooh, I like what Scott just said. I'm going to steal that. I could never say what Mike just said, but boy, does he have big balls. And you just learn things. Then you go to the coffee room and you say, I had a tough call, and somebody pats you on the head. Being in Connecticut, COVID was like, we shut down this state. And then 3 months later, you could come back, but some people didn't want to come back. And so we let the people who were producing at home not come back. So fast forward 4 years, and we have I guess we call it a discretionary hybrid. So we expect people to be in 3 days a week. We don't much, worry about it. For the most part, people follow it. But where there used to be 30 people in an intense, loud environment, now there might be a third of that any given day. So when I have my new rookie, like Peter, who started this week, I feel sorry for him. Because I don't feel like he's getting the same shake that everybody else got. And it's not just me. I researched it a little bit. And as you guys probably know, there's a huge return to work move. Salesforce, Amazon, Facebook, they're all saying, look, we gave it a few years and there's so much less collaboration. There's so much less cultural innovation. There's more turnover because people don't feel bonded to it. So here's the stat that I read that kind of shook me up. It said 1/6 of all the skill sets we have, we learn from colleagues. 1/6 of our entire skill set, you learn from a colleague. You didn't learn it from Scott or Mike or Danny. You learned it from your colleagues who are not there anymore. And so, we try to be modern. We have Zoom training calls every week, and we have a transcriptive tool so that we can hear your calls and give you feedback immediately. It's not the same. So is it just me? I feel recruiting would be harder to get started in than ever, but I have no idea what the solution is because I don't see people ever going back to 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 45-minute commutes each way. What do we think?
So we've got clients, and some clients because of COVID, like we've got a great client in Atlanta, and they're like a specialty accounting finance in Atlanta. So they dominate a geographic market. And they were in I went to their office, beautiful high rise in downtown Atlanta. It's Class A space. And their lease ran out in like August 2020. And they're like, we're doing great. And we're not going to renew our whatever, $100,000 a year place. And they've continued to grow. They do retreats. And then on the flip side, but they're doing like what you're doing. And there is that missing element for them of just being able on the other side of that cube wall, just to pause and go, Scott said this thing. It was freaking brilliant. And Mike's full of crap. I don't know how he gets away with it. Right. But then they're able to, within their own personality, to create and meld those things and weld those things together. Some people like you, Danny, who've got an off physical space, their client, they say, you're going to come on and you're 5 days a week for at least 90 days. And then we have certain metrics. You hit these metrics and that's going to start to liberate you and we're going to create the flexibility. On the other side, we've talked about this as clients because with people onboarding new people, there's few interruptions and they don't pick up bad habits. And they're sitting there going, he's a big biller and he doesn't sound like he's ever on the phone.
Right.
I can be a big biller, and I don't,
Yeah.
they go lowest common denominator, right?
Yeah, fair
They
point.
see
Yeah.
they see Danny come in at 9:30. They see Scott talking an hour, and they go, I can come in late, take a long lunch, and be
Right.
successful,
Yeah.
and leave early. But the guy that comes in late stays till 7. The guy who takes a long lunch,
And they don't see the 20 years that they put
right.
in to get to that point.
So
Right.
but
Yeah.
I think you've got to be very intentional like you are. And, we're coaching our owners that in those modes, you're listening and coaching on a few calls every morning to get them started. And hopefully you've got a training group, or if not, incorporating a couple other people to get that aloneness out. But if you have an office, my advice for that reason is, yeah, you're going to be able to work virtually, but not for 90 days.
Yeah.
For all the reasons you just talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Scott, you agree that it's harder to get started now as a rookie?
I think that in some ways it's an advantage for younger people because they grow up with thought leadership being a very big part of what they're digesting in social media all the time with influencers. When we started, come on, there was no internet back then.
Right.
And so when we would hear about thought leadership, oh, well, that's not for me. That's for a management consultant. But now I think newer people, because I really think, kind of getting back to what I mentioned before, distinction, it's hard to be number one in a big area, be number one in a subcategory. Like, who was the first pilot that flew across the Atlantic? It was Lindbergh. Who was the second? Nobody remembers.
Right.
Who was the first female? Amelia Earhart. There were probably 24 people that flew before she did, but she was number one in a subcategory. Right. So I think, kind of getting back to what you said, Denny, I think with newer people coming in, if they can think like a thought leader early, and whenever I train people, if there's newer people, I say start writing articles. Write 3 questions every manager should ask new employees and give it to every hiring manager prospect you talk to as a leave away gift. I want to give you something. Even if we're not doing business today, this will still help you when you interview candidates. And I think by doing that, there's several benefits. You start thinking about the business more, you establish credibility, and you also get visibility. So I think with newer people, I think that's an edge that they can really use and leverage that to their advantage. Plus, I think the action steps, et cetera. But I think that's just one variable I see that could give them an advantage.
And I think it's fair to say that I have several people in my mentoring. I think of Philip Bell and Pinnacle, very successful, lots of tenure, hires new people. It's always been remote. He's been remote. He doesn't know any better. They don't know any better. And so they don't have any of the issues. I think maybe I'm just scarred because I remember my office is right next to the coffee room, and I had a rookie in his second week, and one of my top producers was getting coffee, and the rookie came over, and I heard him say to my top producer, "Man, I get so intimidated talking to these presidents of companies. Like, I'm right out of school. Like, it just seems really intimidating for me to be making a BD call to president of a company." And my senior producer said, "Well, look at it this way. Danny's president of our company." As if being a president of a company is really no big deal because look how average Danny is. So maybe I'm just scarred by that experience.
No, I agree. It's easier if I had a choice and I wanted to scale quickly, and I was going to have zero resistance, right, from the marketplace, the candidate, the people that would work for us. It is easier to scale a business with everybody at their desk, right?
Yeah.
For all those reasons, because we each could sit down and there's dozens of stories where the tenured person, puts their person, look, I can't tell you how many times the tenured person would be in my office. Invariably, your first deal blew up. It was just like a rite of passage.
Yeah. Rite of passage.
The one you thought was going to happen with and it happens to all of us. And they're sitting there, and here was my ramp up, and this is what I had to get through. And you're fine. Just follow the numbers and You're doing all the right things. And, those are breaking point moments where the person is in a mode of, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Yeah,
for sure.
That's lost.
I think that was really clarified during COVID because we sent everybody home because we'd already been doing Zoom client intakes. It wasn't that big a change for us. And of course, that year was a huge year for the whole industry. And so we were making tons of money, but I wasn't happy. And I realized I just missed the people. like I just missed my environment. I missed the energy. I missed the adrenaline. That's part of it. And I think that's probably a good way to end. That at the end of the day, when these people say it's so much harder in recruiting now, I promise you would miss it. I promise you would miss it. My hero in the business, Richie Harris, who you both have heard before, Richie said, you can leave the business, but it won't leave you. It's simple as that. All right, folks. We plan on doing these sort of chats on an ongoing basis, but please let us know if you're feeling like you're getting something out of it, and if you've got certain topics you want us to tackle, we'll be happy to do that as well. Obviously, I'm not going to do shameless promotions for either Scott or Michael or myself. You know what we do. We all have coaching and training options, and we're here for you if you need us. Guys, thank you so much. I'll let you go about your life, and we'll do this again soon.
I appreciate you putting this together, Danny.
Thank you, Danny.
Always good to talk to you guys. Thank you.